Hey everyone, welcome to Wednesday, October 21st and Thursday, October 22nd. Our lesson outline for today is pretty simple. We've got our do now. That is our first graded piece. So those of you who prefer to write in your agenda, which I hope you currently are doing that at home as well, you're going to write down that we have our book log as our first graded piece. And then I'm going to ask you to continue with this Edpuzzle video and make sure that you finish all of chapter 6 and submit. And then the last graded piece is just to make sure that you have completed this week's iReady. Remember that this is a short week, and therefore the iReady will be open only until Thursday at midnight instead of Friday like it typically is. So make sure that you finish this week's iReady lesson. There are a few upcoming things that I did want to go over with you, so make sure that you pay attention to these 3 items. The parent-teacher conferences are this Thursday. That is not a day off for you. Though you do not have to Zoom at all on Thursday, you will still have required work to do for classes 5 through 8. So you will have an assignment for all of your classes from 5th hour all the way through 8th hour. You will also have in advisory your attendance survey, so make sure that you don't forget about that piece. Just because you have to work on Thursday, though, doesn't mean you have to work on Friday. So Friday is actually a complete day off. No Zoom and no work. It is fall break. So enjoy your 3-day weekend. When we get back from that 3-day weekend is the third bullet point on there for us today. We have a vocabulary quiz next week, so make sure that you spend some time to study. We took Monday and Tuesday to set aside some time and work on Quizlet. So hopefully you have added chapters 1 through 8 vocabulary into your Quizlet. If you did not complete that piece, make sure you go back to the previous lesson, so October 19th and 20th, where it has all the vocabulary listed from chapters 3 through 5, and it also has the assignment for chapters 6 through 8 vocab, so that you can catch up on those pieces. No one wants you to fail a vocabulary quiz, so make sure that you take some time and win and over the next few days to study using Quizlet. Remember, Quizlet is online flashcards. It also has a couple games, the gravity game and the matching game for you to play, and it also allows you to take practice tests and quizzes on there, so you can even do like an oral spelling test, old school elementary style. There's a lot of different ways for you to be able to study on there, so whatever fits your study habits, please take advantage of Quizlet. It is a really nice program. On that note, let's go ahead and move on with our do now. So this is the perfect opportunity for you to go ahead and pause your video to complete your book log. Remember, you need to set a 10-minute timer and read for the full 10 minutes. When the timer goes off, you're filling in your book log by including the title of the book, the page that you started and stopped on, the total number of pages that you've read, and make sure that you give me a nice reflection. I'm looking for a sentence or two that's well written. I've gotten kind of sloppy with some of my book logs that I've been seeing, so make sure that you give me capital letters and end marks at the end of those sentences. I'm also looking for enough detail in your reflections to make sure that you've truly and accurately read the information. Remember, these are books that you have chosen for yourself. So if something's not keeping your attention, you have the power and opportunity to go find something that you're actually interested in. If you need help with that, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to help connect you with a story that I think you might like or enjoy. So at this time, go ahead and pause your video if you have not already. All right, welcome back from your book log. Let's go ahead and get started with chapter 6. As a recap from chapter 5, we learned that Naya is on the move. Her and her family are moving from the pond and they're moving towards the lake, which is a much larger area of water source. So they are sharing that space with the Dinka tribe. And we did learn from last class that the Nuer, which is Naya's tribe, remember they both start with N's. That was our mnemonic for remembering that. They are living in the same kind of vicinity as the Dinka tribe, which is their enemy, their rival. We also had a cliffhanger at the end of chapter 5 when we found that someone recognized Salva in the camp. And Salva also likewise immediately recognized them. We had quite a few guesses. We had lots of people say that they thought it was a family member. Quite a few people thought it was the teacher. Some others said that maybe it was a friend from school. So today we're going to find out who that person is and why it was so exciting that Salva recognized this person. So as we read through chapter 6, you can follow along on your screen. I'm going to go ahead and read everything out loud to you. The video will do automatic stops and starts, so that way you guys have the opportunity to just answer your questions directly in Edpuzzle today. Your video should stop so that way you have access to the text while you're answering those questions. So if you need to go back and reread or make sure that you have the correct answer, you have the ability to do so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is going to start in Southern Sudan in 2008. As they usually do, and this portion begins with Naya. So here we go. Naya's family has been coming to the lake camp for generations. Naya herself had been there every year since she was born. One thing she liked about the camp was that even though she had to dig in the clay and wait for water, she did not have to make the 2 long trips to the pond every day. But this year, she realized for the first time that her mother hated the camp. They had no house and had to sleep in makeshift shelters. They could not bring most of their things, so they had to make do with whatever was at hand. And for much of each day, they had to dig for water. But the worst was the look on her mother's face when Naya's father and older brother Deb went off to hunt. Fear. Her mother was afraid that the men in the family would run into Dinka tribesmen somewhere, that they would fight and get injured, or worse. They had been lucky all these years. No one from Naya's family had been hurt or killed by Dinka, but she knew other families in the village who had lost loved ones in this way. Naya could see the questions in her mother's face every morning. Would they be lucky again? Or was it now their turn to lose someone? Southern Sudan, 1985. Salva's mouth closed and opened again as if he were a fish. He tried to speak, but no sound came out of his throat. He tried to move, but his feet seemed stuck to the ground. Salva, the man said again, and hurried toward him. When the man was only a few steps away, Salva suddenly found his voice. "Uncle," he cried out, and ran into the man's arms. Uncle Jawir was the younger brother of Salva's father. Salva hadn't seen him in at least 2 years, because Uncle had been in the army. "Uncle must know about the war and the fighting. Maybe he will know where my family is." But these hopes were dashed as soon as Uncle spoke. "Are you alone? Where is your family?" he asked. Salva hardly knew where to begin his answer. It seemed like years since he had run away from his school and into the bush. But he told his uncle everything as best he could. As Salva spoke, Uncle nodded or shook his head. His face became very solemn when Salva told him that he had not seen nor heard a single word of his family in all that time. Salva's voice trailed off, and he lowered his head. He was glad to see Uncle again, but it looked as if he might not be much help either. It turned out that Uncle had joined the group 3 days earlier, but since there were more than 30 people traveling together, they had not found each other until now. As they began walking, Salva saw that Uncle had a gun, a rifle that he carried on a strap over one shoulder. Already Salva could tell that because of his army experience and because he had a gun, Uncle was seen by the group as a kind of leader. "Yes, when I left the army, they let me keep my rifle," Uncle said. "So I'm going to shoot us a fine meal as soon as we come across anything worth eating." Uncle was true to his word. That very day he shot a young antelope, the kind called a topi. Salva could hardly wait for it to be skinned and butchered and roasted. As the smoky, meaty aroma filled the air, he had to keep swallowing the saliva that flooded his mouth. Uncle laughed as he watched Salva gobble down his first piece of the meat. "Salva, you have teeth. You are supposed to use them when you eat." Salva could not reply. He was too busy stuffing another chunk of the delicious charred meat into his mouth. Even though the topi was a small one, there was more than enough meat for everyone in the group. But it did not take long for Salva to regret his haste in eating. After so many weeks of near starvation, his stomach rebelled mightily. He spent most of the night vomiting. Salva was not alone. Whenever his heaving stomach woke him, he would hurry to the edge of the camp to vomit and find others there doing the same. At one point, Salva found himself in a line of half a dozen people, all in an identical pose, bent over, holding their stomachs and waiting for the next wave of nausea. It might have been funny if he hadn't felt so miserable. The group continued to walk through the land of the Tuat. Every day they saw lions, usually resting in the shade of small trees. Once in the distance, they saw a lion chasing a topi. The topi escaped, but along the path, Salva saw the bones of prey that had not been so fortunate. Salva and Muriel still walked together, staying close to Uncle. Sometimes Uncle would walk with the other men and talk seriously about the journey. At those times, Salva and Muriel would drop back respectfully, but Salva always tried to keep Uncle in sight, and he slept near Uncle at night. One day, the group began walking in the late afternoon with hopes of reaching a water hole before settling down for the night. But there was no water anywhere, though they searched for miles. They kept walking into the night and through the night. For 10 hours they walked, and by dawn everyone was exhausted. Uncle and the other leaders finally decided that the group had to rest. Salva took 2 steps off the path and fell asleep almost before he lay down. He did not wake until he felt Uncle's hand shaking his shoulder. As he opened his eyes, he heard wailing. Someone was crying. Salva blinked away the sleepiness and looked at Uncle, whose face was very solemn. "I'm sorry, Salva," Uncle said quietly. "Your friend..." "Muriel?" Salva looked around. "He should be somewhere nearby. I don't remember if he slept near me. I was so tired. Perhaps he has gone to find something to eat." Uncle stroked Salva's head as if he were a baby. "I am sorry," he said again. A cold fist seemed to grip Salva's heart. And that is the end of chapter 6. We know that something pretty serious happens to Muriel. It never comes out and exactly explains what happens, but we've gotten a lot of clues here. We've gotten clues back in chapter 5. The Atuat people are known for a very specific reason, and they're very alert as they walk through the Atuat region. If we put our clues together, we can absolutely figure out what happened to Muriel here, and it's not a good thing. Hopefully you're putting 2 and 2 together here and you're figuring out what exactly happened to Muriel. Make sure to answer that question as it's the last question on this Edpuzzle. That's all I have for you today. Make sure that you submit this Edpuzzle and that you move on to the iReady lesson. Remember, the iReady lesson is open until midnight on Thursday, but then it will be counted late after. Don't forget about it. Do great. I'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.